On April 6, 2023, just 1 month before her life would implode, Kouri Richins sat on the set of Good Things, Utah. She was there to promote her children's book, Are You With Me?, a story about a father with angel wings watching over his 3 sons. She looked into the camera and spoke about the unexpected death of her husband, Eric. But while she was playing the role of the grieving widow, the Summit County Sheriff's Office was already connecting the dots of a much darker narrative.
Joining us now is author of Are You With Me?, Kouri Richins, to share her 3 C's to helping kids cope with grief. And Kouri, I want to start with your story. What happened in your personal life?
So my husband passed away unexpectedly last year. So it's March 4th was a 1-year anniversary for us, and he was 39. It completely took us all by shock. And we have 3 little boys, 10, 9, and 6. And my kids and I kind of wrote this book on the different emotions and grieving processes that we've experienced.
Welcome to the Dark Minds channel. In today's case, we examine the anatomy of a betrayal so calculated it was written into a children's book before the victim was even in the ground. We are dissecting the life and crimes of Kouri Richins, a woman who wore the mask of a grieving widow while secretly engineering the financial liquidation of her husband, Eric. From a failed Valentine's Day poisoning to a lethal cocktail served in the dead of night, we are looking deep into the status-driven psyche to find the exact moment a partner becomes a target. Before we begin, make sure you subscribe to The Dark Minds for more deep dives into the world's most dangerous and deceptive criminal minds. Now, let's get into this. To understand the violence of March 2022, we have to look back at the quiet financial rot that began years earlier in the high-altitude luxury of Summit County. By late 2020, Kouri Richins wasn't just a realtor, she was a woman obsessed with the optics of success. In the circles she ran in, amidst the sprawling estates of Park City and the elite ski culture of Utah, wealth isn't just a comfort, it is a vital organ. And Kouri's was failing. While her husband Eric was out at daybreak building Richins custom masonry into one of the most respected businesses in the region, Kouri was constructing a house of cards. Behind the polished Instagram posts and the professional headshots, she was drowning in a staggering $4.5 million of debt. This wasn't just a business slump. It was a total systemic collapse. She was juggling nearly 100 separate debt payments a month, robbing Peter to pay Paul, and desperate to find a big score that would reset the scoreboard. But Kouri didn't just want to be debt-free. She wanted to be the queen of the Utah real estate market. Her eyes became fixed on a monster of a property in nearby Heber City, an unfinished 20,000 square foot mountain mansion. To Kouri, that house wasn't just a flip. It was her redemption. It was the physical manifestation of the status she felt she deserved. To Eric, however, it was a financial suicide mission. He looked at the numbers and saw ruin. He looked at the $2.9 million loan required to close the deal, and he said no. It was a no that Kouri simply could not accept. When a status-driven personality feels their public mask slipping, they don't retreat, they double down. If the front door was locked, Kouri would find a window. Investigators would later uncover that she had begun a campaign of systematic financial betrayal long before the poison was ever purchased. Without Eric's knowledge, she took out a $250,000 home equity line of credit, a HELOC, on his premarital property. She was effectively stealing the equity he had built with his own hands before they were even married, just to keep her failing real estate dreams on life support. She began forging his signature on documents and even went as far as to withdraw over $30,000 from his business bank accounts. She was draining his life's work to fund a lifestyle he had already told her they couldn't afford. This is where the psychology of the status-driven killer becomes chillingly clear. For Kouri, Eric had shifted from being a partner to being a liability. In her mind, the $2.9 million mansion in Heber City was her future, and Eric's refusal to sign for it was the only thing standing between her and the life she felt entitled to. She didn't see a husband providing a voice of reason. She saw an obstacle that needed to be removed so she could access his life insurance and his estate. By December 2021, the financial walls were closing in so tightly that Kouri Richins stopped looking for a way to save her marriage and started looking for a way to liquidate her husband. In the world of criminal psychology, we often look for the moment a suspect crosses the line from thought to action. For Kouri Richins, that threshold was crossed on February 14, 2022. While the rest of the world was celebrating romance, Kouri was reportedly conducting a lethal dress rehearsal. The setting was the family's home on West Willow Court in Camas. It started with a gesture that on the surface appeared devoted, a Valentine's Day lunch. Kouri had gone to a local spot known simply as the Diner to pick up Eric's favorite sandwich. She left it for him in the front seat of his truck with a handwritten note, a classic touch of a perfect wife. But investigators now believe that bread was laced not with affection but with a calculated dose of illicit opioids. The trial testimony from February 2026 has brought the terror of that afternoon into sharp focus. Eric took just one bite of that sandwich, and his body immediately went into a state of emergency. He didn't just feel unwell. He broke out in violent hives. His throat began to constrict. He blacked out, falling into a terrifying drug-induced stupor. When he regained consciousness, he was forced to inject himself with his own son's EpiPen and swallow an entire bottle of Benadryl just to keep his heart beating. But it's what happened next that reveals the true chilling nature of this case. While Eric was fighting for his life on their bathroom floor, Kouri wasn't there to call 911. Location data and deleted text messages presented in court show that Kouri had already left. She was allegedly miles away in Provo, meeting with a man prosecutors have identified as her secret paramour. As Eric lay dying, she was reportedly texting this man, "Love you," and later told her lover, if he could just go away, life would be so perfect. When Eric finally recovered enough to speak, he didn't call the police, a tragic hallmark of domestic victims who want to believe the best of those they love. Instead, he called his sister, Kouri Richins Benson, and two close friends. To one, he was blunt, "I think my wife just tried to poison me." This was the moment the mask slipped for Eric, but Kouri's psychological game was just beginning. Months later, she would text her best friend, brazenly lying about the incident, claiming Eric never had hives and never used an EpiPen. She was already gaslighting the memory of the man she had failed to kill. In the eyes of the prosecution, Valentine's Day wasn't a tragedy. It was a tactical failure. Kouri Richins didn't stop because she felt guilt. She stopped because she needed a more effective delivery method. She needed something that wouldn't leave him a chance to reach for an EpiPen. She needed the Moscow Mule. By February 2022, the psychological boundary between financial desperation and planned homicide had vanished. Kouri Richins had already tried and failed to end Eric's life with a sandwich on Valentine's Day, but the failure didn't lead to remorse. It led to a more aggressive procurement strategy. To get what she needed, Kouri turned to a woman she already controlled through a professional power dynamic, her housekeeper, Carmen Lauber. Carmen Lauber, known in early court filings simply as CL, was more than just an employee who cleaned the Richins Camas home every other Friday. She was a woman struggling with her own history of drug possession and distribution, someone Kouri allegedly viewed as a convenient tool in her lethal toolkit. The trial testimony from February 26, 2026, painted a chilling picture of their interaction. According to Lauber, Kouri first approached her with a lie. She claimed she had an investor, someone involved in her high-stakes real estate deals, who was suffering from a back injury and needed the strong stuff. On February 11, 2022, Lauber met a dealer in Draper, Utah to pick up hydrocodone pills. She delivered them by hand to Kouri in the driveway of Lauber's own home in Midway. But the hydrocodone wasn't enough. It was too weak for the finality Kouri was seeking. Just 2 weeks later, in late February, Kouri reached out again. This time, the request was specific, dark, and culturally coded. She told Lauber that her investor wanted something significantly more potent. She asked specifically for the Michael Jackson stuff. In the world of high-profile overdoses, this was a clear reference to propofol, but in the context of this street deal, both women knew it meant a lethal dose of fentanyl. To secure these drugs, Kouri reportedly paid Lauber $900 in cash. But the transaction wasn't just about money, it was about leverage. Lauber testified that Kouri helped her forge community service letters for her drug court requirements as a reward for her cooperation. It was a cycle of mutual criminality that ended with Kouri holding a bag of 30 fentanyl pills, blue M30 Dirty 30s that were never intended for an investor. This chapter of the story is vital because it dismantles the defense's claim that Eric was a secret addict. Why would a man with a successful business and no history of illicit drug use need his wife to go through a housekeeper to buy street-grade fentanyl? The prosecution's timeline is devastatingly linear. Kouri secures the pills in late February, and just days later, the drug that she specifically requested, the Michael Jackson stuff, is found in a fatal concentration inside her husband's stomach. The supply chain was complete. The weapon was loaded. All Kouri needed now was a celebration to mask the delivery. The evening of March 3rd, 2022, was framed by Kouri Richins as a night of celebration. She told investigators she had finally closed the deal on the nearly $3 million Heber City mansion, the property Eric had spent months fighting to stop. To mark the occasion, Kouri allegedly prepared a drink for Eric in their kitchen on West Willow Court. She chose a Moscow Mule, a cocktail traditionally served in a heavy copper mug, one that is perfectly opaque, hiding whatever might be dissolved within its ice and lime juice. According to Kouri's original statements, she brought the drink to Eric in their master bedroom, where they sat by the fire talking about their future. But as the clock ticked toward midnight, the narrative she presented began to fracture. Forensic toxicologists who took the stand in February 2026 revealed that Eric Richins didn't just have fentanyl in his system. He had a concentration that was 5 times the lethal dose. Crucially, the medical examiner, Dr. Pamela Sue Ulmer, testified that this was illicit fentanyl, not medical grade, and it had been ingested orally. It was a hot dose designed to kill with surgical efficiency. As Eric lay dying in their bed, Kouri claimed she fell asleep in one of her children's rooms.
Today.
He was just fine. We were fine.
When you say we were fine, what time did you see him when he was alert?
We had a drink together at 9 to celebrate something at work tomorrow.
Okay.
We went to bed. I went to bed with my kids. He went to bed in our bed.
What time did you guys go to bed?
9:30.
9:30. Okay.
9:45.
And then what alerted you to him today? Right now.
When I just woke up, when I sleep with my kids, I'll wake up and I go back in my own bed.
Mm-hmm.
I just crawled over on his side.
And he was laying in bed. Okay.
He was on his back on the bed, and
Okay. And he was on. You said he was on his back. Okay. Where are your children now?
to sleep in that room. 2 are awake with their ears.
She told police she woke up around 3 a.m., returned to her bedroom, and found Eric cold to the touch. At 3:22 a.m., she dialed 911, but the digital evidence tells a different story, a story of what the defense has called the 6-hour black box. While Kouri claimed her phone was charging in her bedroom while she was with her child, investigators found her phone was actually highly active during those hours. Between the time she allegedly served the drink and the moment she called 911, her phone was locked and unlocked dozens of times. Multiple text messages were sent and subsequently deleted. Prosecutors argue she wasn't sleeping, she was waiting. She was watching the clock, ensuring enough time had passed for the 5 lethal doses of fentanyl to stop Eric's heart before she ever picked up the phone to save him. When first responders arrived at the Kamas residence, the scene they found was hauntingly inconsistent. Kouri was performing CPR on the floor, but the emergency team noted that Eric was already showing signs of lividity, blood pooling at the lowest points of his body, meaning he had been dead for quite some time. Perhaps the most damning detail to emerge during the trial's forensic phase was the state of the kitchen. While Kouri sat in the bedroom with her dying husband, the glassware in the house was already being handled. Prosecutors presented evidence that the mugs used that night were found in the dishwasher, already through a cycle. The forensic black box wasn't just a period of time. It was a period of active sanitization. Kouri Richins had written the ending of Eric's life long before she ever sat down to write her book on grief. She had provided the drink, she had cleared the evidence, and now she was ready to play the role of the century. By September 2023, Kouri Richins had been held in the Summit County Jail for 4 months. The cameras were gone, the book tours were over, and she was no longer the grieving mother of Park City. She was a defendant in a cell, facing the very real possibility of life in prison. But the trial proceedings of February 2026 have revealed that while Kouri's body was confined to a cell in Colville, her mind was still busy constructing a narrative. During a routine sweep of her cell block on September 14, 2023, deputies discovered a 6-page handwritten document hidden inside a book, specifically an LSAT prep book. Scrawled across the top in jagged, urgent handwriting were the words, "Walk the dog, but take vague notes so you remember." This wasn't a diary entry or a letter of reflection. Prosecutors have characterized this document as a literal blueprint for perjury. In the letter, Kouri gives explicit, line-by-line instructions to her mother, Lisa Darden, on how to coach Kouri's brother, Ronald Ronnie Darden, to testify. The goal was to plant a false seed in the jury's mind, that Eric Richins hadn't been murdered but had been a secret drug addict who sourced his own lethal supply. Kouri wrote, and I quote, "The connection has to be made with Mexico and drugs." She instructed her mother to tell Ronnie to claim that Eric had confessed to him during a Sunday football game that he was buying fentanyl from workers on a ranch in Mexico. She even told them to reword it however he needs to make the point, just include it all. When the Walk the Dog letter was first made public, Kouri's defense team scrambled to perform damage control. In a recorded jailhouse phone call to her brother, Kouri offered an explanation that was as creative as it was desperate. She claimed the papers weren't a letter to her family at all, but were actually chapters of a fictional mystery novel she was writing about her time in a Mexican prison. She told Ronnie, "They literally took those papers out of the story. It's a 65-page novel." But as the trial unfolded in February 2026, the prosecution dismantled this fictional book defense. They pointed out a glaring psychological detail. The letter didn't just contain story elements. It contained specific legal instructions. Kouri told her mother to tell a man nicknamed Lotto not to text her about church or skiing trips because it doesn't look good. She even listed her outstanding mortgages and asked for help securing a home equity line of credit on someone else's house to pay her mounting legal fees. This wasn't a novel. It was a desperate attempt to manipulate the legal system from the inside out. For the jury sitting in Judge Richard Mrazek's courtroom in early 2026, the Walk the Dog letter became the smoking gun of Kouri's character. It showed a woman who believed that if she could write a book to fool a grieving community, she could write a script to fool a jury. But in the world of true crime, the most dangerous thing a suspect can do is leave a paper trail, especially one that begins with instructions to walk the dog. As we enter late February 2026, the quiet, snow-dusted streets of Park City, Utah, have become the backdrop for the final act of this psychological drama. Inside the 3rd District Court, the air is thick with the clinical language of justice. Judge Richard Mrazek presides over a room where the two versions of Kouri Richins have finally collided. The grieving Angel Wing author and the calculated architect of a $4.5 million debt-clearing homicide. The prosecution's closing arguments, delivered by Brad Bloodworth, have been a relentless march through the digital and forensic footprint Kouri left behind. They didn't just present the 26 counts of financial fraud. They presented a woman who viewed her husband's pulse as a stop payment order on her dreams. They showed the jury that on March 7, 2023, exactly 1 year and 3 days after Eric's heart stopped, Kouri didn't visit his grave with flowers. Instead, she hit publish on Amazon for her book, Are You With Me? The irony is a jagged pill for the jury to swallow. The book, dedicated to my amazing husband and a wonderful father, was released while the ink was still wet on the secret $2 million life insurance policy she had attempted to collect. The very prose she wrote to help her children heal is now being used by the state to prove her lack of empathy. In the eyes of the law, the book wasn't a tribute. It was a marketing campaign for a widowhood she had manufactured. As the jury begins their deliberations in this final week of February, the case of Kouri Richins leaves us with a haunting question about the nature of the mask of sanity. How does someone sit in a makeup chair for a morning talk show, smiling and speaking of grief, knowing that the man they are mourning died because of a drink they mixed with their own hands? If Kouri is convicted, she faces a sentence of 25 years to life without the possibility of parole. For the Richins family and for Eric's 3 sons, a guilty verdict won't bring back the man who built their home with his own hands. But it will finally close the chapter on a story where the narrator was the villain all along. Kouri Richins tried to write the perfect ending to her own crime, but she forgot one fundamental rule of both literature and law. Eventually, the truth reads itself aloud.